We're going live now, and while I wait for questions to come in, some of you have kindly asked some questions, but the first thing I think to get across is why are we doing this live Q&A on the Associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers exam in the USA. Now, I know there's lots of people who are asking questions outside of that small remit, and we're happy to try and get through and answer them, but the point of today is to try and encourage people in the States, where there's been lots of interest, to sign up for the examination and to find training. So let me just show you, I have my associate certificate and I'm very proud of it, of course. I passed it in 1987, a long time ago. And if it was just for a piece of paper, then of course it wouldn't really be worth the effort, would it? But it's what the paper represents, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit. And even better than that exam, that examination certificate of the associate, I actually have my father's here, as you can see, far bigger. I'm hoping that the company will take note and will increase the size of the certificates. This one is dated 1969. So my father took the associate examination in 1969. And I can remember as a youngish boy just how proud he was to get that. All right. So I think the first thing is, what is the philosophy of the AWCF? And if you noticed, I didn't call it the AW. I don't know what that exam is. It's the AWCF or the associate, or the Associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. So the philosophy of this examination is relatively simple. Over 100 years ago, the Worshipful Company of Farriers developed an exam, a basic exam for farriers. We now call it the Diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. But 20 years later, in 1907, they decided that they needed an examination to push farriers further. And they had realised then, both the farriers and the veterinary surgeons, that farriery could be used to help horses with all sorts of conditions of the leg, and especially the foot and the hoof. So we, or I should say the Worshipful Company of Farriers at that time, developed this exam to try and promote those skills and that knowledge. And our examination today still tries to do the same thing. Now, of course, the world has changed a little bit, and although farriery is a very traditional subject, that need still arises. In other words, I strongly believe, and I'm sure all of you out there believe, that farriery has a big place within the work of trying to promote soundness in horses and to overcome conditions. So a couple of examples really would be a horse with a fractured pedal bone. How does shoeing help that to heal? What about a deep puncture of the foot? How do we protect it while that's ongoing, but allow us to, or allow either a veterinary nurse or the owner to treat that wound every day? So farriery can help with those, and that's what the associate's about. It is not about the basic shoeing that the diploma is. Obviously, in order to get to associate level, you need to have gone through basic training and have acquired basic skills, and you use those at associate level. If I occasionally look off to my right hand side, which is that way, it's because I have some notes here and I need to remember to answer some of your questions, and quite a lot have come through. At this early point, I want to say that there's been quite a lot of offers of help from quite renowned farriers and very skillful farriers and knowledgeable ones in order to help farriers in the United States of America to achieve the associate level. And amongst those, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some of them, but those that have offered have included Simon Moore, Jay Tovey and Mark Trussler, who are all relatively new fellows. I don't want to downgrade them, fellows, but they are examiners, but they also give clinics, and they're willing to help. If any of you have an organisation that will organise a training days, then they would be happy to think about helping. Mark Coldwell offered his help to me, especially on the west coast of America. Dean Dibstall, who many of you won't know, but he actually got the highest mark in the practical in the associate last year, and he's keen to get going as a clinician, and obviously he has very recent experience of passing associate, and he would be a very good chap to help you. Mitch Taylor, whose school, the Kentucky school, horseshoeing school, is where we've recently held exams over the last 5 years or so. And Mitch is an associate. He has sat the exam himself. He's away from the States at the moment, but he's returning in July. I hope that's not confidential information, but he's returning in July. And certainly the school there is very keen to put on courses. Sarah Taylor's there. You can Google the school. It has a Facebook presence. Ask Sarah for information about the exam, but more importantly, if there's enough of you, there will be training put on there for the exam. So that's Sarah that you need to contact. All right. So I've got a number of questions here, and I'll go into those. One of the first one is in the UK. Of course, while you in the States were working busily shoeing horses, most of the UK and Europe had finished, gone home for their tea, and were pestering me with questions. But it was good of Jeff. Jeff came in with a little bit of a more philosophical question, and he said, what is the, when there's so much CPD, continual professional development, what is the validity of the AWCF? Well, I think he's mixing two things there. You are, Jeff. I think CPD goes on and clinics go on, and there's an exam. We're trying to put the two together. I really want to see clinics and workshops and lectures that are helping those of you that want to take the associate to get there. The validity of the associate comes from in a number of ways. Firstly, it comes from the craft itself. The fact that we are having record numbers taking this exam, and it's being sat in 3 or 4 continents of the world now, shows that it has the validity from the craft. In other words, the craft holds it in such high esteem. But it does have validity. It is used, for example, in the UK for farriers to be qualified to train apprentices, so it's getting an outside stamp of approval from the FRC. Its validity really comes from the level of the examiners and the structure behind it. So I hope that helps, but we shouldn't confuse that with clinics. In other words, there's always been this argument, oh, if I want to learn something, I'll just go to a lecture, I'll just go to a clinic. I don't need an exam. I can tell you something as somebody who's taken lots of exams in their life, is the thing an examination does for you, it gives you a target and a focus. It's very difficult to be disciplined enough just to study. But when you have something to aim at, when you know that you are going to be tested at the end of that process by somebody, then that helps you to get there. The other thing is there's not really anything finer for a craftsman than to be tested by their peers and to be found that their standard is considered to be high. So that's a great honour to any of us, and it's a great feeling. Doesn't mean everybody wants to do that, but I am assuming that those that have come to this online broadcast actually feel that way anyway, or to a certain extent do. So what I'm interested in doing is to actually getting all of you shall we say, to pull your finger out, to get on courses and to sign up to the exam. You can go online. If you don't know how to get information, just either put in www.wcf.org.uk, or if you can't remember that, just put WCF Farrier in, Google it, and it'll come up. And you can click on there on exams, and it will bring all the information that you need on the AWCF. It's even got a special page that is just AWCF for the USA. So you can do that. It has lots of other information, for example, the book list, which we might get to if we have time. So I'll go on to another question, and I have a question from Ian Pope. Ian is a farrier in South Africa, and he passed the associate. Actually, he passed it when he was in the UK. He's back in South Africa now. And he says the structure of this AWCF is not a training program, which is quite correct. The structure of the AWCF is an examination. You need a training program to get there. He also asked what is different between the AWCF and the diploma and the FWCF. Well, the associate, as I said earlier, sits higher than the diploma from the point of view of it is a specialist exam looking at a farrier using skills and knowledge to help to correct either faults in limbs or to overcome injuries and diseases of the foot and lower limb. The FWCF takes it further from the point of view of the company tries to produce farriers who are able to pass on this information. So diploma is basic knowledge and skills, saying that you are a competent farrier. Associate says that you have this ability to work on injured, lame horses with various conditions. And the fellowship says that having learned all those skills and all that knowledge, you're able to pass it on. That's why we have farriers that are able to stand up at a podium at a conference and speak, are able to write. In other words, it's a communication exam, really. Elliot asks, can US citizens enroll on the BFBA, which is the British Farriers and Blacksmiths Association AWCF course? I would imagine they can, but would you really want to fly 12 times over to the UK? That's going to be very, very expensive. So I would suggest that the best thing is to bring the course to America, and that's one of the main reasons I'm trying to do this. That you know, either through your association or through a bunch of you, you need to get organised. You need to approach the Kentucky Horseshoeing School. You need to approach Sam Durham on the West Coast. I'm sure there's others that will help, and ask them if they will put on regular courses to get you to that level. There are a number of fellows in the States. Travis Burns comes to mind, Mike Wildenstein, Chris Gregory, Doug Butler, and Dave Duckett. So that's 5 off the top of my head. All these gentlemen understand the examination process and understand what you need to do to get there. So I would suggest that you try and approach them and try and get them to do that for you. Yvonne Julian, and I hope I pronounced that right, Yvonne. Yvonne, I know from Finland, and she asks what books should she read? Well, there is a list of books on the company's page for examination, so you can see that it tells you what the basic ones are, what the associate ones are, and what further reading are. But this is definitely not what can I say? I'm not using this to advertise my books, but I have to tell you that I wrote 2 books for the Associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. And in Corrective Farriery, which came out 15 years ago, on the 3rd paragraph, it says there that this is a book that is written for the Associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. When you write a book, you have to have a vision the whole time, otherwise you just wander off. And my vision for both these books, and that's the other one, the second volume, is that I would write a book that gave all the knowledge that was required to pass the associate. Now, of course, the day books come out, they start going out of date. But I think that 90% of what's in those books still holds very true today about what you need to know. So people worry about what they need to know to pass the associate. Don't just stick to those books. But all I'm saying is I wrote those particularly as syllabus for the associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. Now, let's see, what else have we got? Yvonne also wanted to know about fitting shoes to feet. She said that she was talking about the shoe board, the exhibition board, which gives you 20% of your practical marks. So it's very important to do a good shoe board. But she said she prefers to make shoes for feet. Should she put them on feet, video them, take them off, put them on the board, and do it that way? I'm not sure whether you need to do all that, Yvonne. I would say that some candidates occasionally put an album of pictures showing that they've used similar shoes on feet, but your examiners are actually going to examine the boards to the shoes to the syllabus. In this exam, it's quite strict about what you have to do. There are 6 shoes that you must submit, 6 types. You've got to submit 10 shoes, but there's 6 specific ones. So please read the syllabus carefully, because it tells us as examiners that if you don't do that, we cannot pass you in that section. So you must follow the syllabus. It's there to help you. There's an asterisk, I know, on each section that you have to do on the shoe list. The syllabus is really comprehensive in giving you advice. Don't let it frighten you. I know it's 11 pages. I went through it today. I always go through it before I examine, but I went through it today before this. It's 11 pages. It's there to help you. Take your time going through it and look up what you need to know when you need to know. Any good course trying to get you through the associate will, the clinician, your tutors will stick to that to train you to get through. They will not go off at a tangent and decide that even if it's not part of the syllabus, they're going to teach you it. There's too much to learn as it is. Okay, I was asked about visas and farriers getting over to teach you. Well, let's put it this way. Farrier is no different from any other subject, and lots of people go to the States and teach and are visiting lecturers. I've done it in January at the International Hoof Care Summit, and America has laws, and like every other country, and when I go to America, I'm expected to follow those laws. So that's what I do, and I don't suppose it's going to stop, and people are going to stop coming over to help you, and stop coming over to examine you. Now, Vern asks, how many modules have been signed up to? I don't know, but I do know that last year there wasn't enough, and therefore the exam didn't go ahead. So it's in the interest of everybody if enough people sign up. It doesn't require a lot of candidates, and I can't give you the exact number. Our registrar probably knows, but if you sign up and if you get those people that are interested, and we know there are lots and lots of people interested in taking this exam, then it will go ahead. But the fact is the examination has to pay for itself. In other words, although the Worshipful Company of Farriers is a charitable trust and the exams come under the charitable trust, I'm sure everybody in the States understands that we can't subsidize it. In other words, we can put it on, the examiners and their travel is paid for through the company, but it must come from the fees. And if there's not enough people, it gets too expensive for the people that are there. So there is a minimum number required. And again, one of my main things for putting this on is to try and say to you, come on, sign up, and it will then happen. And it's quite a long way off. It's in October, so I'm not sure how many months away that is, 7 or 8 months. That gives you enough time, if you are a competent farrier, to get to that level of skill. If you start doing it tonight or today, if you start organising clinics, if you get together, if you join up together, then it will happen. I should say that I was inspired to do this by the 2018 AWCF study group, which is a group of American farriers who are looking to study for the associate. So you can sign up to that on Facebook, join them, and all get together and say, when are we going to put these on? Because actually, of course, clinicians expect to be paid. But if there's enough of you, the price really comes down to get somebody over to help you. And as I say, there's people in the States that will really help you get there anyway. But you do have to make an effort to get out there and do that. Now, I don't know if we've had any questions come in, or whether people are just clicking on and enjoying me babbling on to you. I'll have a look if there's another question. One question I've had is here, and it says, well, it says Simon Moore, evening from Northern Ireland. Hello, Simon. And Jeff Newnham says, is it me or is there a problem with buffering? Jeff, as always, it's probably you, but you old buffer. I don't know, I can't say. I mean, from my end, everything seems to be going well. Oh, and Norman says, running fine here. Jeff, you just need to invest in a new laptop, I think. I'm still looking for any new questions. Let me see. All right. But I'll ask one from here, one of my last few questions, which is, will the diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers be offered in the future? And the fact is, we really have not wanted to run the diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers in the States because we have a good relationship with the American Farriers Association, and we recognise in the UK the level of the CJF. So in other words, if you have the CJF, then you can enter for the associate. And there's good reason for that. Although we do a fast track, in actual fact, I'm a strong believer in there is a reason for these steps, you know, that they help you. So I would suggest to everybody that if you can take the CJF, do that. It's a great intro, it's a very good examination. It'll really test you, it'll test your knowledge, and it's a great intro to the associate. To go straight in at the associate is very difficult. But that's why we don't offer the diploma in America, because there seems to be a very good viable examination there. All right, Sarah says, people tend to wait to register and then have to cancel exam. Don't wait, get registered. Very good advice, Sarah. That's Sarah Taylor from, obviously, the Kentucky Horseshoeing School. And Sarah also knows the answer to an earlier question. She said, we need 20 modules registered to host the exam. Okay, why does it say 20 people? The associate is basically split into 2 modules. The knowledge side, so where you do the written exam and the oral, and the practical side, which is your shoeing and shoemaking, your exhibition board, and also the modern materials. So actually what that means is it just requires 10 candidates to sign up for the whole exam. Now, occasionally there are candidates who are coming back and just doing the half, should we say, that they haven't passed the first time round. But if you want to do it, and if it's going to happen in the States, it just requires 10 full candidates, or should we say 20 modules. So thanks for that help, Sarah. And Sarah says, additionally, we have a collection of study materials available for candidates. So, you know, that should be your first port of call, really, is to ask Sarah about that. And Jane Murray Manley says that hers is working fine and there's no buffering. Thule asked, and I hope I've pronounced Thule correctly, what are the requirements to even get to the program? Do you need work experience? Okay, Thule, you need to be a farrier, and if you're thinking about work experience, it would appear that you're not a farrier. You know, that's another question for another day. I hope if you wish to become a farrier, you become one, but this is not a program, it's not a basic program. The whole point of the associate is that it's a specialised exam for farriers who already have a qualification, who already have the basic skills and are now looking to move on a little bit further. Now I'm just trying to move this up, but I don't seem able to. Yvonne asks, what does it take to get an honours mention, as she puts it, from the exam? Okay, the first thing, as somebody who never passed anything with honours, I would just say it's wonderful to have ambition. The first thing to do though is pass. People have passed with honours at the associate, of course they have. They need to get an A in both modules. We call it a distinction if they get an A in one or the other, and lots of people manage that. But it's truly a special person who gets an A in the practical part and also has got an A in the knowledge part. An A really means that you have got, I think it's 83%. I'm not quite sure of the math, but 83% is what's required, I think, to get an A. So if you think of it as marks out of 10, that means you need to average just about 8.5 marks out of 10 on everything. So if you only get 7.5 marks out of 10 on one subject, you need to get, I don't know, 9.5 in the next part. Very, very tough. But certainly my experience of exams and whether it's training diploma candidates or whether it's training associates or fellows is you need to aim high, because very few people actually perform quite as well in their exam as they do, should we say, in their everyday work. That's the nature of exams. So in other words, if you aim just to get through, just to get the right standard, then you may get unlucky because you've only got to make one mistake. So actually, you want to put marks in the bank. In other words, everything you're good at, really get some good high marks. So I'd say to Yvonne, I admire your ambition. I hope you get there. I hope that you get to honours level, and I would love to see that day come. A pass at associate, I can tell you, is quite an achievement. All right, how many associate, the Worshipful Company of Farriers are there? How many associates are there approximately in the world? Well, I do get some questions thrown at me. I can tell you what it used to be, if that helps. It used to be about 5% of the farriers in the UK, where of course we had most of the associates. It's probably been going up a little bit lately. We've had quite a few successes the last 5 or 10 years, but I doubt whether that means it's got 10% of the farriers in the UK, which probably means it's 1% of the farriers in the English-speaking world, and goodness knows how small an amount in the world of farriers in all. So that's what I mean. It's a very, very special examination. It's difficult enough to pass in the UK, let alone outside the UK. So that's why I want you to get as much help as possible. Now, of course, during last year, we had our first examinations in Denmark. So in a country where English is not the first language, and we certainly had successes, it was quite difficult for them. Danish people actually are extraordinarily good at speaking English. In fact, sometimes you think they speak better English than most British people do. But nevertheless, it was very testing for them. And of course, technical terms are sometimes even harder to learn. although most modern anatomical terms, which are based on Latin, are the same across all languages. So that does help a bit. So I can't give you an exact figure, but I can say it's not a high number. So Jeff says, can an overseas holder of the AWCF enter the UK Register of Farriers? It's not recognised by the FRC as a level for registration. I don't think that's why people are taking the associate. If they just want to register to come to show in the UK, if they're in Europe and they can show that they've had experience for 6 years, they will register. If they want, or if they need to take an exam, the diploma is an awful lot easier than the associate, so they'll take that. So I don't see any reason why somebody would go through the associate to get registered. I would have to say, I've said I've been saying recently how high a standard the AWCF is, and I would have to say anybody that's capable of passing the AWCF, I would be entirely happy that they are registered in the UK. I don't make the rules. That's the Registration Council and the registrar. They're the ones that organise whether farriers come in. Anyway, that's not really a question for trying to get our American colleagues to take the AWCF. Meg asks that what she says is that I said on my last online interview or broadcast was that one of the reasons I wrote The Hoof of the Horse was because I was really concerned that farriers didn't understand hoof growth and the hoof. And she says, is that now expected of them? Well, I think it's always been expected. As I say, I discovered that because as an examiner, I often used to just say, how does the hoof grow? And often even at associate level, I didn't get any sort of answer. And I thought it was bizarre that the one thing that farriers have in their hands all day long is the hoof. And they hadn't really thought, how does this grow? And also some of its physical properties. So the hoof of the horse is not on the reading list for the associate. I probably need to pull my finger out and ask the Worshipful Company of Farriers if it can go on the reading list, but it's not at the moment. As I say, there is quite an extensive reading list telling you what books to study for associate. So Mary Bramley asked, did you say that CGF is required or recommended to sit for the AWCF? You need to check this with our registrar, but from my point of view, over previous years, that the prerequisite for sitting the associate in the USA was either to already have the diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers or to have the CGF. But that's the sort of question you can email our new registrar, who I'm hoping is listening in on this, and I think she is. But you can contact her through the website that I gave you the name of, which I'll give you again, which is www.wcf.org.uk, and go to examinations, and you can find that you can contact our registrar. So please do that. I don't want to give you the wrong information. And actually, I've just seen that our registrar has given me an answer. So thank you, Karine. And she says that there are currently around 350 associates. So we've risen above 10% in the UK. There's still less than 50 outside. But to put that in perspective, because there's 3,000 farriers in the UK, there's always estimates of the number of farriers in the States. And you get estimates between 20,000 and 50,000. Because you're not registered, it's not so easy to give that. So you can see that that's less than 1% of the population of the States. And probably in total in the rest of the world, maybe there's another 3,000. So, I think I've reconnected. I hope you didn't lose me for long there. It just told me very quickly that we'd lost connection. I think we've come back. So Todd asks, I seem to get bogged down with anatomy. Do you have any suggestions, strategies, or recommendations for preparing for the written exam? Okay, Todd. It was not me that said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I can't remember who did, but I know a very good American songwriter put it in a song. You can get a lot of anatomy down in questions by a drawing. Examiners actually like drawings because we can see that you're naming anatomy. Now, of course, that doesn't say that you understand how the foot or the leg works, but if it's strictly an anatomy question, then do a good drawing. Usually exam questions will say illustrate with labels or use diagrams. So they're giving you a big hint, aren't they, that that's what the examiners expect. And often where it asks for a diagram, you will get, even if it's asking for a written answer as well, you'll get half your marks for a diagram. So it's also a good way to learn anatomy is to draw it yourself over and over. If you think about it, if you go through some basic farriery textbooks, there's probably only about a dozen drawings you can do. You should be able to learn them off by heart. So it's a great way of learning is to do that. And my other tip to you is when you get your examination workbook, which will be about the size of this, about an A4, a normal sized booklet, you don't have to draw a tiny little drawing in the corner. Nobody's going to charge you for the paper. Use the whole page. Fill it up. Do a nice bold drawing and practice doing big bold drawings. Nobody expects you to be Michelangelo. You're not marked on your artwork. But if you do a big drawing, it's easier for the examiners to see. It means that you're not trying to cram things in. So learn to do that, practice that, and that's really a great way to learn your anatomy, even for writing it. As I say, you must remember that anatomy is not physiology. In order to answer physiology questions, you obviously need to know the anatomy. Physiology is about how the body works. So how does the hoof grow? What happens to the tendons? What do the tendons do? All right, Patrick, are you satisfied with the AWCF system, or can some parts be better? If you think I'm going to answer that, Patrick, with the registrar and the chairman of the exam board looking on, yes, of course I'm going to answer it. Look, we had this exam since 1907. As I say, the philosophy was correct then and it's correct today, but it always needs updating. About 20 years ago, I was one of the main authors who brought in the modern materials part. The exam really at that time had not been reviewed much for quite a long time. And in some ways it was just a diploma rerun with fire welding and with more difficult questions. So we went back to the basics. As I say, we examined the philosophy. We said, well, actually, this is a good reason, a good fundamental reason for why we need this exam. How do we answer it in today? Or how do we ask questions which are going to make people study to answer it today? So it was revamped. And now, every time an exam takes place, you'll find that you don't know that as candidates, but the examiners have to write a report, and they report it back to the exam board, and sometimes they make recommendations. So all the time, the examination is being tweaked and is being changed. And every now and again, we have a big question asked about it. So, I mean, Patrick, if you have something about the system that you think ought to be changed, you should write to the examination board. They really take it very seriously what any farrier out there thinks about our exam. And it is our exam. I don't mean it's just the company's exam. I mean it's the craft exam. So of course there's always things that can be made better, and I hope we just continue to review it, tweak it, and every now and again we bring in a big change. So we have, and I'm really going to have a job pronouncing this one, but I'm going to say Ko Sheng Yen, and it says, actually, I am from Asia, and it is and nothing about English in my childhood. So make AFA the system very difficult to me, and I'm sure it is difficult to you. There's not a lot at this point I can do. I can't really help you with that. I'm sorry, that it is an English language exam, and it says quite clearly in the exam syllabus that it will stay like that. Mike Garrett asks, says, my 2-year mark having my CGF will be November, 1 month short. Will I need to wait till next year? Mike, I would send a very nice message to our registrar. I think you'll find all of us are trying to help people. Don't rush the exam if you're not ready, but you know, I'm not able to answer that, but I'm sure our registrar and chairman and the executive board would make a decision on that. That's all I can say, really. Mark Trussler. Well, Mark is an examiner now, and he's an FWCF, and he says, do you recommend candidates having a mentor in preparation for the AWCF, and how do they find one? Well, I think we have a mentor list. Of course you have to have a mentor. And I know the reason Mark asked this, because I trained him, and he's like a second son to me, and with all the frustrations of a teenage second son, I can tell you. But Mark is a wonderful farrier, and it's a very serious question, so I'll try and answer it seriously. You need a mentor, and you need probably more than one mentor, and you need to get a training scheme. You know, again, at this level, this is not apprentice level, this is not basic training level. It's what I would call is grown up level. So you need to do a lot of these things yourself. But it really helps if you can get together with others. I would, as I say, my first point of call would be to email Sarah Taylor, or email Sam Durham and say, how can you help me? How can we get together? How can we get a group of us that make it economically worthwhile to get people in to do training? And I'm sure all that's achievable, but yes, of course you need help. It's a very lonely place just to study on your own. You need continual feedback, and one-to-one teaching is better than ever. All right, so we've got the registrar has come in and has asked me to remind you that the AWCF has a fast track route. You do need 6 years, you need evidence of 6 years experience, and you'll have to go on the website to find out what that evidence is, but I think it's usually accountant to show that you've had a business for that time, and probably a veterinary surgeon to write a signed letter to certify that you have. And you can be fast-tracked, but I hope, in other words, it's better that I'm just pointing you at finding that out than trying to say this is the exact answer. I'm sorry if I don't carry all this information in my head at all times. That's why we have a syllabus, that's why we have a website. Go on there and have a look. And I'm going to try and go through all these questions tomorrow. I'm sure the registrar will, and our chairman will, and we will try and answer all the questions, go through them and answer them. And I can see there are lots and lots of questions coming up. And just to remind you that the Worshipful Company of Farriers is always open to feedback for continual improvement processes. We're very open about that. We know there's no organisation on this earth that can't improve, and we want to continually be improving. We're not going to arrogantly say everything's right and fine. So please give the feedback. That would really help us, and it'll help farriers who haven't taken the exam yet and those that are thinking about it. Okay, Kelly has left a question here. It's the last one I wrote down before we actually went underway. And she asked, will there ever be well, I call them exemplar papers, in other words, papers which are marked, and she suggested that some of them would be marked to show what C grade is, a B grade is, and an honours grade. That's a very difficult thing to do, I'd have to say. Now, actually, the examiners are trained, and we have to go on a training course once a year, otherwise we lose our status as examiners. And actually, we are trained on papers of various standards to see that we are coming up with the right mark. You can get an exemplar paper, but I would have to say this sort of feeds back to the mentor situation that was just asked. If you get somebody that's gone through the associate, or if you get somebody who has experience examining or is a fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, I can tell you that they would go through mock exam papers with you, and they would point out what your strengths and weaknesses are. In other words, when I've done training at diploma or associate level, I actually sit and mark the papers with the candidate sat next to me, which is a funny thing to do, but it means you can talk them through exactly what your thinking is and why they're getting marks or not. So I think better than the company just putting out an exemplar paper and there would be a limit to the number and it'd be quite complicated. I think it's better is the mentor system, that you find somebody that will look at your work in detail. And you'll find that everybody is always positive and tries to give positive feedback. But of course, we all have to give honest feedback. It's no good to somebody just patting you on the shoulder and saying, you're really good, and then you go to the exam and find you're not. So I try always to be diplomatic with students, but on the other hand, certainly you're not doing anybody any favours by not giving them the honest truth. Okay, I've got the registrar's email here, and you can email her at registrar@wcf.org.uk. So if you forget that, go on the website and just click on contact. So Mike Garrett has said, what are the dates for the test in October? Now I'm going to quickly go onto my iPad, because somewhere here, do I have them? I hope I do. I'm sure if I don't, the registrar will tell me. So potentially, I do have them here. Potentially, they run from something like the 25th to 27th. So that sort of period. I can't tell you whether it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or just two of those days. But October 2019, it is at the end of the month. So 25th, 26th, 27th. And because it is 6 hours of exams, and on the first day you sit the written test, on the second day you do the practical and usually the orals, but sometimes the exams, depending on candidate numbers, actually run into 3 days. So I can't tell you exactly, but that gives you an idea. As I say, it means anybody starting today actually, providing they already have the basic skills, but they need to do those revision courses to help them understand what the exam involves. Then you can get there. You have got about 8 months, so please do it. It asks here, what is the cost? Again, you have to go to the registrar for that. I'm not going to pretend it's cheap, because it's not cheap. But as I would say, when somebody said to me once about the cost to me of the exam, I said, if you think that's your only cost, then please don't do it, because your real cost is the time you put in, maybe the new tools you buy, the courses you go on. So that's your cost. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it was worthwhile. I think any of you that do it will be, from a professional point of view, the most important thing you've done in your life. I would have to say, the day that you get that certificate that I've showed you, I don't want to say it'll be the happiest day, and it was the happiest day of my life, because my wife might ask me about our wedding and having children. But you know, as I said earlier, there's no greater feeling than to be assessed by your peers, by people you respect, and you come out of it with them saying, you know, this person has reached this standard. There's no finer feeling in the world. So it's worth it. And of course, it's going to cost you money. Everything costs you money, and it costs you time. But I hope enough of you do it. Mark Trussler says it might be worth suggesting a Worshipful Company of Farriers foot balance course as a way of evaluating where a farrier is up with their development and whether they are ready for sitting the AWCF exam, or what areas they need to work on to bring themselves into the level of the exam. Well, Mark has particularly got foot balance at the front of his mind, because I know him and 3 of his colleagues, Simon Moore, Jonathan Nunn, and I think Mark Watson, who are all good fellows, have recently have done a course today in Inniskill and in Northern Ireland. You know, foot balance is right at the heart of the practical exam. If you're not preparing your foot correctly, then actually it's very difficult to pass the exam. It's very difficult for examiners to pass somebody who's not doing a really good foot prep job. So I agree with Mark. You know, Mark is one of the people that said that as a clinician he would help. So all I can say is, if 10 of you got together, you would be able to get him over to the States, and I'm sure he would do that for you. Over 2 or 3 years, he could run a mock exam for you. I haven't asked Mark if I can say that, so he can always say no, but I think he would do it, and so would a number of other chaps. There's lots of people out there that are willing to help you, but you also have to help yourselves. And I've just had those exam dates confirmed, which just shows you I am able to fill in the diary correctly, which is unusual for me. And they are 25th to 27th of October this year. Please not just make a date, but you should contact the registrar, and you should contact one of those training centres, and you should get on with it. And Sarah's also confirmed that from the Kentucky Horseshoeing School. So there you go. Everybody has got that down. Jeff Newman says, currently modern materials account for only 40 mounts. Do you think this part should expand? Well, Jeff, all I can say to you as somebody who sells lots of glue, I wonder what your motive is for asking that. Now, Jeff, as you know, I've already said that actually the modern materials part was a big part of what I put forward. Yes, 40 marks, and I can't quite remember what percentage that makes of your total mark. All I can say is, if you really did badly in your modern materials, you're unlikely to get through. So you need to take that just as important. You just need to take it as seriously as the rest of the exam. You know, we're always having this debate in the company, and I think if you wrote a letter in and said you think it ought to be looked at, I would actually support you in that. You might find that the exam board comes to the conclusion that it's fine as it is, but it might stimulate us to change it. But it's always worth looking at that, because as we know, Jeff, there isn't just your glue on the market. There's other glues. There's different types of glues. There's dental impression material. There's various pads. There's other materials that are being used for shoes. So we need to look at that. And there's a point. It does spell it out in the syllabus how there are certain skills you need in modern materials. There are also certain processes that you need to have knowledge of. So in other words, you need to understand how these materials work, what are their pros and cons. Again, whenever I'm training candidates, I say it's easy to get carried away and say what's good about something. You also have to know that for most materials that we put on the horse's foot, there are also consequences. So a good farrier understands both the advantages of a product and the disadvantages. Not, Jeffrey, that any of yours have any disadvantages, I'm sure. All right, so Mike has got back and he said, what does the practical test consist of? Okay, it's 3 parts. And as I say, I can't tell you the exact proportion. I know I'll have a guess at it, but the main part is the practical test. So you are tested on your ability to trim a foot. Actually, initially, you're tested on your ability to assess the horse to make adaptations. But all candidates at the associate put a front and a hind bar shoe on. If that sounds simple, I can tell you the level that you're expected to do it is very high. You make the shoe, and of course there are adaptations to that shoe to suit that foot. I can't tell you what they are because the horse isn't in front of me. But your ability at associate is to decide whether it needs clips, whether it needs a rocker toe, roll toe to carry that out, the size of the bar, whether it needs a little bit more lateral support. So you need to do that. That's one part. Then you go in and you have 2 hours to shoe the horse, to make the shoes and shoe it. You have already made your exhibition board, so that's part of the practical test, and the examiners will also bring that into the oral. And finally, usually on the last day, you will do the modern materials part, where a cadaver foot will have 1 or 2 tasks for you to do. Often repair something, sometimes doing a resection on. Again, it's all listed in the syllabus. So those are the 3 parts of the practical, and you need to pass all 3 parts. But obviously, if you do really well in one, it will lift your mark up if you don't do so well in the others. I don't know if we have 1 or 2 last questions. I see we've got about 5 minutes to go. Just to remind you all again that I couldn't get to all the questions. I'm going to go through it again tomorrow, and I'm going to give some written answers. So I hope that will help. You need to go and download the syllabus. It's there for a reason. It's there to help you. The examiners are told quite strictly to examine to that. And actually, I did have a question from somebody who said, how can you get honours if you just answer the question? Well, listen, I've just written a book, a whole book, just on the horse's hoof. Believe me, you will never get to the limit of answering a question. So it is the level that you answer it at. The real trick with any exam is to answer the question that's asked you. If you give really good additional information, of course, the examiners look favourably on that. So go and download the syllabus. I think the 3 things I would like to tell you is download the syllabus, have a good look at it. It's there to help you. That's what you'll be tested on. Organise clinics and workshops. I can't do that from here. The company can't do it from here. You have to do it. You have to take charge of this. You have to get together, get on that group, 2018 AWCF study group, and say, where are we going to have the first workshop? Who's the clinician we're going to get over? Don't ask me. I'm too busy here. I would love to come over, but that's not the reason I'm doing this. You've seen a number of people. You can ask. I'm sure there'll be some additional ones who would say that they would like to come over and do a workshop. So please do that. And then, but importantly, enter that exam. It works by PayPal. If the exam doesn't happen, you get every cent back. So you're not going to lose your money. Enter the exam, but we want it to go ahead. We only need 10 of you, and it will happen. If there's 12, 14, or 20, then all the better. I think that's about me done here. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I say, I'm not going to finish. I'm going to spend an hour or 2 tomorrow going through this. I'm sure the registrar will do the same. I'm sure our exam board will look at what you've said. So those are the 3 things. Look at the syllabus, organise clinics, and enter the exam. All I can say is that Nike logo. Just do it. Pull your finger out and do it, and it will be one of the best things you've done in your life. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who's come on board. We've had a really good number come on. I know it was quite a specialised, I should say, online broadcast that we've done. I can see 59 comments to go through, so I will go through them and I'll answer them as best I can, and I know the rest of us will. So thank you very much, and at some other point I will see all of you. Goodbye.